Smart 24, driving business.
We'll be back from the break and you're still watching the Policon. Hope you are doing well, because for us, we are moving on so well with our kind of conversations and the discussions. Well, of course, you can share with us your views on our socials to understand more about what you feel should be done by government in regards to the increasing public debt, one that is already hitting to approximately 78 trillion Ugandan shillings. That is courtesy of parliamentary figures. Of course, I did mention earlier on in the show that some of the media tabloids and all the other reports have been coming in, stretching it to 80 trillion. So that means it's a simple approximation of what is likely to be by the end of this financial year, or where we are actually heading to, or where we are actually at the moment. But besides that, our conversation is still here with Honorable Alana Tugonza, Member of Parliament Bulisa. We are definitely still looking at how Uganda, how the public debt has affected the economic growth, and of course the running of different government bodies, because all of those are affected in the same way as you, the private sector, are affected, because the private sector players are pretty much more worried about this increasing debt, even though the policymakers do believe that we should not be so worried since we are trying to contain it. Now, speaking of containment, I'm still with the Honourable, and I did mention we shall be looking at how can we contain, or what are the containment measures for this public debt. What is supposed to be done to ensure that we don't increase, and we at least try to maintain it where it is, or slightly decrease, or rapidly decrease anyway, which may not be so in just a few months, but due to different phases that will be laid out, you'd never know. Things do change. Honourable, by the look of things, what should be done? What are those measures that, of course, the committee has been able to discuss, and other private sector players that look into or that analyze such situations in the country?
Thank you, Sonko, and our viewers. I think what we need to look at to curb this, of course, we need to watch on our solvency as a country to make sure that our income will be in a position to pay our debt obligation and the liquidity levels. So we need to monitor that to make sure that we have that. Our production, our economy is growing. We make sure our economy grows so that we are in a position to collect more taxes, and of course be in a position to domestically raise revenue to pay our debt. Then, of course, what we are doing right now at the country, expenditure cuts. That one is also a good measure in terms of to avoid wastage, to look at wasteful expenditures and direct our resources to productive expenditure. That will save us a big deal. In that, by so doing, as I've said earlier, it creates employment, it grows the economy, it supports the private sector, you know. So we must move that way. That's what countries do. I don't want to say, as I said, our debt is not bad, but it doesn't need to be excessive also. We were surprised as a committee. We went to one of the countries in East Africa were shocked with their debt ratio. It was too huge. But the advantage of that country, there is a minimal corruption. There is a minimal wasteful expenditure. And their monies are geared towards improving on production. Now, because of that, they don't feel it. The economy is growing. they are collecting taxes, and there is no corruption in tax collection. So you can see, though their debt ceiling is high, they have really exceeded the limit. But you see as if they are comfortable because of that, and that's now that's our problem now. Ours, we have the money, we have the solvency, we have the liquidity, but now we are wasteful. Corruption is on the peak. We are not putting our monies into proper use, into production sector. Now that's the problem. You can't imagine this country had a debt ratio of 71% to the GDP. Okay. And we could see development. We could see people are happy, people are paying taxes. You could see there is no leak in terms of tax evasion. The strict enforcement is strict. Mm-hmm. And they were comfortable. They were really surprised on our level of debt ratio to GDP. But now that's what we need to work on. As I told you, that corruption, wasteful expenditure, and many other things. Mm. Yeah.
So you're speaking of working on the wasteful expenses, yes. And then issues to do with corruption. Yes. The issue of expenses here, civil society organizations have always cautioned government on some of the ministries, and they were pushing for, different subsectorials to join one ministry, to merge, yes. The merger. Mm-hmm. So this particular merger, I think mergers have actually been quite helpful. But then also, let's look at the issue to do with government recruitment. Mm-hmm. This does look like one of the other issues as to why we end up having a lot of expenses in the country. The recruitment policies whereby procedures whereby you're finding different people working on a job that can be done by one person, yes. You're finding there are over 5 to 10 people. Yes. If you're to look at this, how can we prevent this?
You are really right. You know, in this country I'm talking about, they had to go through restructuring of ministries, MDI. They don't have tourism, they have trade. Now for us we are separating the two. For them they are merging. They had a Minister of Development. You can see they have really cut on the duplication of roles. And this is the way to go. That's the wasteful expenditure I'm talking about. In terms of salaries, vehicles, office space. In this country, this is the country whereby a government will sell a building and then rent.
And go to a private firm to rent.
Expensive, and the money they are paying. Look, you can't imagine amounts of money we are paying for our embassies. You can buy a building in 2-3 years. You wonder why don't we do it? But we make it a current expenditure. You wonder who planned for this nation. And we have a ministry of planning. We have the National Planning Authority. These are things we should talk about in order to eliminate wasteful expenditure and channel this money into productive expenditure. Our economy will grow, will be much better. You will see this debt going down because we'll have more money for discretionary expenditure. We'll have more money for debt servicing. And this is the way to go. You have talked about recruitment policy. In this country, this is the country whereby you go in an office and the person doesn't report, but is drawing salary. They don't want to talk about contracts. They don't want to talk about a duplication of roles. You see, these are things we must discuss as a nation if we are serious to better our debt for purposes of today's topic.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Mm. And now let's look at the other effects of this public debt increasing. Do we have any effects of it on, for example, other aspects of the economy, for example, on inflation, yes. And then employment? Because by the look of things, employment mainly from the government bodies, the public service now, and then inflation. As a white, Kenya is facing it rough now. Yes. because, of course, the president in Kenya, William Ruto, is trying to contain these inflationary pressures. Almost the leader of opposition had started staging every Monday to be one for protests and everything. But if you're to look at this, how does this public debt impact or affect on employment and inflation as a measure?
Let me look at the inflation part of it. You know, as I told you on the start, when we started this show, we are blessed as a country to be a food basket. That has really cushioned this country from a number of distress and risks.
We have the food security with us.
We have the food security with us. So it normally cushions us with inflation. Save for Kenya. Kenya depends on posho for a good percentage of their food.
The ugali is a big meal the other side.
A good meal the other side. They are not like us that we have matoke, we have sweet potato, with that, it has really saved us a big one. But if we didn't have that, at this rate of public debt, at this rate of investing in wasteful expenditure, at this rate of non-productive expenditure, it would have affected our economic growth. And in return, it would have affected our inflation. You see now, we seem to be doing well in terms of depreciation of our shillings to Kenyan shillings, for example. It is because of that. It is because of that. The inflation, the risk, the igniters of their risk on inflation are too slim in that any change in food price, it affects them across the board. They have had droughts. And for us, we have had good rains in some parts of the country and droughts in the other. And one part can feed the other. That saves us. In terms of, and that's why the effect of these demonstrations we are witnessing in Kenya, it is because of that inflation. Though some politics also involved, but that inflation is really hitting them hard, and even the depreciation of shillings. On recruitment, it's hitting us, and we are struggling. We are struggling in that we have recruited very many people. Our wage bill is too high, and sometimes you find where the wage bill need to be is not there. We need to focus, like at local government level, doctors in health center for doctors in hospitals. But you find there are very many people in ministries doing nothing, a lot of officers. And this public service guidelines and policy whereby a person just move from one rank to the other because of having spent a number of years in service, it's also having a toll on us in terms of our budget. Now, having said that, we are struggling with paying our wage bill as a country. That's the truth. And that's why we end up with a debt to finance our budget, because we can't fully finance our budget. If it was possible, then we wouldn't be going for the loan to supplement our budget. Yes. So it's having a toll on us, and that's why I think a trajectory in terms of increase in debt. We are struggling to finance our budget. That's what I mean. But the issue is that if we deal with these issues of wasteful expenditure, investing non-productive, it would have been for a short term, then we pick and move on.
Now, Honorable, when you look at this also, is that according to the next, I would stand to be corrected if I am wrong with this. According to the latest reports coming in, is that 6 trillion yes. of the 50 trillion budget will be going to servicing the debt. I don't know how true that is.
No, not only 6 trillion. I told you 17 trillion.
Off?
Yes, off the budget. It's going to service. I read for you the figures. I don't know. I told you our budget, total budget is 49.9 trillion. But we are going to use 17 trillion to service the debt. So our discretionary expenditure is 33 trillion.
So that
That's
means
what I'm telling
in
you.
the long run, even after paying the debt, we are likely to go in for another loan.
Of course, now the budget, we can't finance the budget fully. We are going to go for another loan. That one is obvious. And we already know, we already know in the budget this, because of our projections, we know how much is domestic revenue. We know. So the balance of the budget is going to be financed by the loan.
Now let me also cracking the part of revenue collection. When the Uganda Revenue Authority is giving us the annual performance report and everything, they normally tell us they even exceed. They go into what you could call the kind of collection. They actually even exceed their target sometimes normally. And then you ask yourself questions, if the revenue collectors, where our main basket of money is coming in, because that is what we will say taxpayers' money. That means when Ugandans pay the taxes, the tower in Nakawa is computing everything. If you're to look at that, where does this leave us? Because if we are saying URA is hitting its target, even going beyond, it's exceeding even the target, where does the money go to?
That's a very good question. That's a very good question. And we must be realistic with our figures. I'm surprised all the time if you have been following me on the committee. I've been asking ministries how could you really, to the dot, get to know that we want to borrow this money, we got this loan, and we use it without any plus or minus balance. What a chance. Oh, you know, which kind of statistician is this? To us, the auditors, it normally gives you an indication there is corruption. A person requests for $200 million to do a project, which project that was in form of design, and you spend all the money without a balance. How? So that brings me to your question of URA. We would have expected, if URA is collecting over and above what the target was, which target we used in the budget as revenue for we're expecting to collect, we would have expected them to reduce on the debt. But that will not happen. In fact, they will bring a supplementary budget to add on. So to me, this country, I started by saying this country has money, but our problem is corruption. Our problem is not having our priorities right. And if we address those, we don't have this wasteful expenditure. We deal with less productive expenditures. I'm telling you, our tax base will increase. And when it increases, will more and more over time suppress the debt, the debt ceiling. And we will find ourselves financing our budget. During Kibaki's era in Kenya, they were almost achieving this.
He renewed that the economy of Kenya, which had been left in by Arab Moi.
Yes. But he renewed it. They were moving to finance their budget. It is possible in this country, so long as we address issues we are talking about. Yes.
All right. Now, financing 17 trillion. Also, my worry I think is rotating around the mere fact that if you say 17 trillion is going to fund, that means we are decreasing on that budget. Or rather, we are decreasing on not only the budget, but also on the debt.
Yes.
But then at the end of the financial year, you realize even after decreasing on it, the increase we receive is sharper and normally overbounds the one we were currently having. Because before the start of the financial year, we were at 73.
Yes.
Now, we have an addition of 5 trillion already.
Yes.
So, where does this come from?
So that's the unfortunate situation we're experiencing. Our debt service was for last year was 15 trillion. Now we are 17, according to the budget.
So that means we even went and borrowed more.
Yeah, that is the appetite we are talking about. If Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development with the National Planning Authority doesn't go back to not have that appetite to borrow, we just look at our priorities, right? Or do we need to spend this money? That's why you see when they cut our budget, even as Parliament, we are okay. If it makes the situation better, so be it. But still, they will cut here and take it somewhere. They take to give it to donate it to maybe an investor who at the end of doesn't deliver. And it's like business as usual. That is the corruption we are talking about. That is the unprioritization we have. We need really to refocus as a country. We really need to love this country. And no, we must have a Ministry of Planning that is geared towards bettering our economy than thinking so long as we are below the threshold for World Bank, threshold, the charter, and the appetite continues. You can't imagine. Very good. These people are very bright. Very good projects, well thought, transformative, productive, but they kill them. They end up on paper. And then we end up with such situation. You see now, URA is strangling the few taxpayers because it's not in position to increase its tax base. You will see we have been discussing many things in Parliament today, including IDs. You can't trace a taxpayer because the ID has no, you can't trace, if an ID, police is saying they have lost the ID, they can't trace the owner, then is that an ID?
It's
ID
not
should
identification.
be in position to pick you up your home, to have your contacts. So,
because we fill in all those details while going for the national ID.
So anyway, these are things we should discuss as a nation for the better of our country. Yes.
Okay. And of course, the financial year is left with only a few months to come. I don't even want to call them 2 months, a few months. We only left with 1 month. The month of June, we shall not count the month of June because it's simply it's when the financial year comes to an end. The budget is simply a 49 you mentioned 49.9 trillion. Yeah. So that is where you will, a simple round of an approximation of 50 trillion Ugandan shillings. The former was 47.1, and the one we are currently in, or the one that the government is still servicing in one way or the other. Of course, it was having a pin of the parish development model as the key priority, having households into the money economy. But it does not seem to be very realistic by the look of things here, because as the public debt is actually growing, you wonder where the money the government is borrowing goes to. At the end of the day, we have lots of projects that have not been worked upon, yet even the money is there. We have issues like the Mandela National Stadium. That one is also creating chaos. Rehabilitation of roads within Kampala. Another big one, the standard gauge railway. All those still need more money. The question is, where is the money going to be coming from? Because government is still supposed to be clearing off these particular debts, that and more. But when we return after the break, meanwhile, we're going to be turning our eyes onto the last segment, where our discussions this time would be, where is the red flag? Where shouldn't we exceed with this public debt increasing? Because there are implications, and which implications are those that we definitely need not to tap into? And then what should be done to ensure that at least we can contain this debt in the next financial year? Big questions coming up, and of course the answers will definitely be digested in one way or the other. So keep it Smart 24 as we talk politics and economics here on the Policon.